Steven Andrus here for thelines.com, playpicks.com, joined by the Lines golf writer John Hasselbauer. It is PGA Championship week. In this video, we're going to show you what to look at Southern Hills Country Club, also what stats to know, what to look out for in this loaded field for the second major of the season in 2022. We also want to let you know that John's preview is available on the site right now. You can find it by going to the homepage. And if you are finding us later in the week, you don't see it in the top four here, you can always find it under the odds tab, under golf. And then under John Hasselbauer's name, you'll find the PGA Championship preview. And also want to let you guys know that we're going to have a free contest for you where you can win Amazon gift cards later on, middle of the week, around maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. We should have it up. Play.thelines.com. Again, play.thelines.com. And you'll find our PGA Championship contest where you can take a shot at winning some Amazon gift cards here. So, John, let's kick things off here. And the first thing I want to talk about are the favorites, as we do most weeks. And as we expected with Scotty Scheffler on this heater in the spring into the summer here, he is the favorite or the co-favorite at 5 of the major books. Jon Rahm right in that same top tier with him. Rory McIlroy as short as 12-1 as well at DraftKings, but 14-1 elsewhere. And then Justin Thomas and Collin Morikawa rounding out the top 5. And of course, Tiger Woods is also in this field this week for the PGA Championship. So your first initial thoughts on the top of the board here before we break down this course and break down maybe some of the names that further down the board. Is this a tournament where you're looking to maybe play one of these guys at the top of the board, or are prices too short for you here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think any major, that's sort of the first decision you have to make, is the favorite in peak form right now, where he could just impose his dominance on the field right now. That is Scotty Scheffler. I think it's interesting that there's not a discrepancy or a gap between him and the next guy. He's kind of co-favorite with Rory and Rahm here. That's not what I would have expected. Obviously, he's looked incredible to start the year. He's basically the runaway FedEx Cup champ already. Yeah. Like, he doesn't really need to win another tournament to lead the FedEx Cup points going into the playoffs. And he's almost a shoo-in for player of the year. He's also a Texas guy, very close to Oklahoma. He's been outspoken about this is his favorite course out there. Like, his favorite course in the world is Southern Hills. He loves this place. It makes sense. It suits his game. It's going to put an emphasis on your short game. You can get away with it on your drives a little bit. It definitely favors someone who's a little bit longer, but total driving is still important here. Approach always important at any championship venue and around the green. I mean, we saw what he did at Augusta. The guy just could not make a bogey no matter where he left himself. And there's going to be a lot of that here where you're in uncomfortable, sort of in between 30-yard runoff chip shots. That's what Scotty Scheffler does best. So I think for me, I don't usually bet the favorite, but I gave a long thought to Scotty this week because he's played this course a bunch. I think I read that he shot 6 under in a practice round last week when he was there, which if he does that in tournament play, like, watch out. That might be enough to win this tournament at 6 under when all is said and done. So if I was to go the favorite route, I mean, how could you not go with Scotty Scheffler? I think he's sort of head and shoulders above the rest of the class. Me personally, I ended up there's a lot of guys in the 100-1 plus range that I like, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But because of that, I think I'm building a little bit longer of a card starting in the 20s. Yeah,
I think better minds can differ on the philosophy of how to build your card in a major here, right? And I think you and I are ones that tend to like to have a few more names on our outright card that'll, at times prohibit us from using a Scotty Scheffler at that price. But I think you can also make the argument that if Jon Rahm was around 10-1 to win the U.S. Open last year, and Scotty Scheffler has won a WGC, the Masters, a couple other tournaments as well. He's won like 4 of his past 7 events now after the Byron Nelson as we record this on Sunday. I mean, that's Tiger Woods stuff, man. I mean, that's even Will Zalatoris mentioned, like the heater he's on has been like Tiger Woods era type stuff. So I think if somebody were to make the argument that Scotty Scheffler at 12-1 is a little bit of a value, I'm not sure I would say that's an asinine comment or anything. So I think it just comes down to your philosophy and how you want to build the card. So if you look at this field, it's obviously going to be loaded. The only real notable name that's not here is Phil Mickelson, the defending champion, for obvious reasons with the PR nightmare and the rumors of just gambling addiction. So, if you haven't heard about that and you've been living under a rock, then feel free to go Google Phil Mickelson and have yourself a nice entertaining read catching up on what the heck's going on with Uncle Phil over there. Other than that, as we mentioned, major champions are in here. We have the senior PGA champion that qualified. What's notable about the PGA Championship is that you have PGA of America professionals from clubs all around the country playing in their own tournament qualifiers to get into the PGA Championship. So that's a fun little caveat to this major that's different from the other three majors on the calendar. And then top 70 on the money list for the PGA Tour will get you in here as well. So obviously one of the most loaded fields in golf. Let's talk a little bit now, John, about the course itself, Southern Hills. And, in editing your preview here, what stood out to me is that we can talk a lot about the history of this course and the way it has played the last time it hosted major tournaments and PGA Tour events. But you almost have to throw that out the window considering a recent renovation here, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky one to handicap because, for one, we haven't been here in 15 years when Tiger won in 2007. Obviously, there's not much we can take away from like Tiger's play. I don't know how many other total players are in the field now versus that year. So 1-to-1 carryover of like performance isn't going to be relevant here. I will say the work that Gil Hans did on this course in the restoration in 2018 was very much a restoration and not a overhaul or renovation to change the course. So I think it's very interesting that the work that's been done is basically adjusting golf for inflation since the Great Depression when this golf course was created. It's been a 6,900 yard course every year. It's hosted the last 7 majors. But they needed to restore it so that the bunkers that were put there in place in the beginning were supposed to be imposing for tee shots. So if the players walked up there today and they played at the tees where Tiger Woods played from in 2007, they would just clear the bunkers and there wouldn't be much thought about it. So the restoration was really meant to adjust to the modern length. It's not meant to, overpower. I guess that's not the right way to put it. The length is not supposed to be US Open style length where it's long for the sake of being long. The courses are stretched out to a margin that sort of makes sense for the current state of the game of golf. So it is long. It's listed at 7,500, and we've talked about this in the preview as well, that it could play shorter. I think anytime you're hosting a major, you want to have that flexibility to move tee boxes around so players aren't hitting the same shot 4 days in a row. So I think we'll see a lot of that. I don't think this is a week that you want to read into. This is a proximity 175 to 200 sort of week. We'll see that the hole layouts are actually pretty equal in terms of how many holes are under 400 versus mid 400 versus 470 plus. So I really love that. I think you can't be a one trick pony here, a specialist. You have to be well-rounded in the way that they've sort of designed these holes, even though it does list 7,500 on the scorecard. It's not pure length. A lot of that length is in the long par threes. It's in 620 yard plus par fives, and it's a really balanced mix for the par fours, a bunch of different ranges.
Yeah, just to further drive the point home on what you're mentioning here, there are weeks where we're doing these previews and we're building out a model, and there's just an abnormal number of holes where you're going to have, a similar club no matter, which one you're on. So that's when we can pop proximity from a certain yardage range into the model and really start to hone in on what guys are best with either a mid iron, or maybe it's a course where they're going to have a lot of wedges in their hands going in. Or maybe it's a long course where we're doing proximity from longer yardages. To your point, they're going to use close to the whole bag here in this tournament for a major champion. And I think that's what's fun about this major in particular in this course, is that it's going to test almost every club in their bag, and maybe even change up the clubs that are in their bag if they change some tee boxes here in the middle of the week. So this is going to be a true test for these guys. It's also only a par 70, so only the 2 par 5s here. So the big long hitters, won't be able to feast on them like we see at Augusta every year for the Masters, where par 5 scoring is so crucial. There's only 2 here, and as you mentioned, they are enormously long and also into the wind as well. So even for the longest hitters, would you be surprised if they're getting here in 2 on these 2 par 5s?
I would, yeah. I mean, I guess it's possible. Like we watched the Mexico Open and we saw John Rahm was getting to 630-yard par 5s and 2. So wind swirls, sometimes it can be helping. It all just depends. I think similar to what we saw at the Wells Fargo, that also featured 600+ yard par 5s. The course really doesn't want you to go for it. They put a lot of hazards there if you take a risky shot. So I think, again, it's going to be laying up to your number. So some guys might have 100 in, some guys might have 50 in. But players can really like position themselves on those holes to whatever number they like best for an approach shot, which again just makes it interesting, the variety of shots that you have to take here. And it's a par 70 and the par 5s aren't gimmies. So I think, again, that your winning score here is going to be single digits. I'd probably guess 8 under is probably the watermark for now, but I'm also hearing potential like extremely high winds, like 30+ mile an hour winds. And if that's the case, we could have a Shinnecock situation on our hands where just nobody can hold any of these greens, and we're looking at an over par winner. So really important to check the weather all week this week, because if it gets bad, then that sort of flips the philosophy here of approach may not matter, because if it's really gusting, then it's going to be hard for anybody to hold the greens, and then it just becomes a scrambling contest, which is what we sort of saw at the Arnold Palmer Invitational when Scotty Scheffler chased down Victor Hovland earlier this year.
Your prediction of around 8 under for the winner this year would hold up with history as well. 3 of the past 5 PGA Championship winners have been either 6 under like Phil last year, or Brooks Koepka in 2019, Justin Thomas in 2017, each one at 8 under par. For the stats that you are weighing a little bit more heavily this week, as we do pretty much every tournament, we're going to use strokes gained on approach to some degree. As you mentioned, distance is going to be important here. So you're using some combination of strokes gained off the tee and driving distance. You mentioned the plateaued greens and maybe some false fronts, and maybe some good shots that don't actually get rewarded, requiring some good scrambling and strokes gained around the green. You also mentioned bogey avoidance with the tough conditions, major history over the past 5 years, and then with any major, I think we both agree on this, just a good, well-rounded look at strokes gained total in difficult conditions. And then if you do want to use putting in your model, it is on bent grass this week. So my question to you, John, is which of those stats are going to be the most weighted, do you think, for your model this week? And how much of a percentage are you going to give them?
Yeah, I think starting with what do you do with approach around the green and off the tee, and sort of looking at tee to green and weighting that differently, because it's going to be a full-on tee to green test this week. And anybody who contends in a major, you can't really have a weakness. You need to be well-rounded for that week. So in general, I want guys who are not deficient in any of those 3 areas when I sort of narrow down on a player pool. Approach is going to be the most important. It always is. Like I was saying before, if the wind really picks up right now, it looks like it could get pretty crazy. So if it does get crazy, I might actually even flip it to around the green being a little more important than approach. But right now I'm probably close to 20% waiting to approach, and 10 to 15 for around the green, 10 to 15 for off the tee. I think off the tee is one where you can probably get away with it if you're not super long here, depending on where they put the tee boxes. And if you're like erratic off the tee, you're still going to catch the fairway more often than not, I would say, just the way that they've opened up the fairways. But I think it is very important to hit the right side of these fairways, and the players who are in control of their drives and can pull driver and put it on the left side of the fairway versus the right side of the fairway when they need to. Those are the guys that are actually going to have the most scoring opportunities, because the angles that you're approaching these greens on really do make a difference. They're tightly dog-legged, and the difference of being on the fairway on the left side and the fairway on the right side is two very different shots. So I think because of that, it is still important to be strong on off the tee. And then the recent major history is something that I'm definitely going to weight a little higher than I would most weeks or even for most majors. It's just a really interesting combination of qualities at Southern Hills that really embody what every other major course tends to have. It's got the length of a U.S. Open this year. It's got the sort of links, rolling fairways, tight greens complexes, and high winds that you would expect at an Open. And Augusta National is probably the number one comp course to this. So if you played it well across the board in majors, I don't really see a reason why you can't bring that success to this week.
A little behind the scenes here for everybody. My studio light broke before we did this, so apologies if I'm a little bit darker than I was when we started recording this. The sun is starting to set here in my beautiful confines in Louisville, Kentucky, and we got a couple kids in the cul-de-sac having a good time. So they're maybe a little just as excited for the PGA Championship as I am. So if you hear some kids yelling in the background, trust me, they're fine. They're just having some fun out in the cul-de-sac. But as we wrap up here, John, let's talk about some players that stood out to us. Obviously, your full betting card will be out on thelines.com on Wednesday, as you do each and every week during the PGA Tour season. Your player spotlight in your preview is on Jordan Spieth. So if people want to go read more about him or why you're eyeing him, looking for the best odds, you can go read those details there. But I know that there's a couple names here that popped for us when comparing the odds. And I think you and I would both agree that in years past, there has been a lot of, maybe betting a surging player a month or two in advance for a major, since these odds are up all season long, to try and lock in a great number. And obviously there's some people out there that got some amazing Scotty Scheffler numbers around like 30 to 50 to 1 before he went on this ridiculous tear. But other than him, we've actually been rewarded by waiting this week for some key players. And I know you and I both agreed on Hideki Matsuyama. His number, frankly, just, we disagreed with. Some 40 to 1s over the weekend while the Byron Nelson was finishing up. I think I'm curious. In my opinion of that number was that, it was based on recent injury, but he's healthy now, so he should never be that number. And we just saw another 55 to 1, I think, at WinBet. As we recorded this, probably won't last long, but if you happen to see this early and go see, and if you have WinBet in your state, 55 to 1 for Hideki's a little ridiculous. But just a couple names there. I know you and I both agreed on Cameron Young you got him at 110 to 1. I got him at 100 to 1. So I think overall the philosophy here is that the blanket rule of trying to get numbers on guys for a major championship weeks ahead of the tournament doesn't really apply as much anymore, it seems.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it was a bit of a misconception coming out of the Masters, where Scotty Scheffler was probably the only example. Him and maybe Cam Smith were the only two examples of players where if you bet them earlier in the season, you got a better number than what was available that tournament week. And that's just because they had to win. Excuse me. That's because they had to win twice between then for them to dip that far. As we look at this week, there's so much competition in the sports book marketplace that everybody's vying for market share. Everybody's kind of competing against each other to get bets on their books. So we see a lot of odds boosts. We see a lot of special promos. DraftKings has a promo. I don't know if you've seen this. I think it might be New Jersey only, and I haven't seen it yet, but you can literally just double the odds of any player that you want. So you're seeing like,
I think it is state specific, because I'm in Indiana and I saw some people tweeting it on Saturday. And I didn't see it in Indiana. So maybe you guys that are watching are lucky you're in a state where DraftKings is offering that. But your point remains that check the promos because people are competing for our money for these major championships.
Exactly. Yeah. And apparently it's in New Jersey. I haven't seen it yet. I'm curious. I don't really know how I'm going to handle that because I feel a little wrong betting like a 24-1 Scotty Scheffler or a 50-1 Jordan Spieth. But I mean, if you have access to it, I would, the first thing I would do is take Scotty at double the number if I could. And I had that promo at my disposal, but yeah, I mean, there's promos everywhere. So I think we've sort of seen a shift in the strategy of futures where more often than not, and we're talking on Sunday where we see good numbers, and usually Monday is when we really start to see books move. For some reason, DraftKings had a little bit of a shift yesterday where they re-corrected their odds. That's when Cam Smith drifted to 35-1. I tweeted that out. I took that right away. I think you might have too. And now it's down to.
I literally told my wife, "Hey, sweetie, do you want some breakfast this morning? I'd be happy to go pick up some breakfast." Drove from my house in Louisville, Kentucky, across the bridge to Jeffersonville, Indiana. Got my 35-1 on Cam Smith, and as we're talking about this right now, I'm seeing a 22-1 on Cam at DraftKings. So I think all of golf Twitter hit Cam Smith this week.
That's right. I mean, you got to use your own discretion. Whenever you see a line, you got to ask yourself, like, can this drift further? Or is this a mistake? And that was one where we were like, this is a mistake. The 55 that you mentioned on Hideki, I haven't committed to it yet, but I do have room for one more guy in that range. It's going to be hard for me to not take advantage of that. But he's on a short list of guys in that mid range that I'm considering. And like you said, we're both on Cam. I'm very high on Spieth, and I've got Cam Smith. And that's sort of the only three that I've bet so far.
For sure. And we mentioned Cam Young. I think the thing with him is he's so long off the tee. He's been playing really well of late. And I think there's a couple 100-1s left out there on him, but for the most part, he's in that 60-71 range right now. Yeah, as I'm looking at this and as we record this now, 70-1 at DraftKings, 65-1 at FanDuel and Caesars, 80-1 at BetMGM. There's 100-1 at PointsBet and Bet Rivers still on Cam Young. But again, just furthering the point, please shop around for the best odds on a player you like, especially in a major championship, because these books are competing for our dollars and you're going to get a better price. And it's going to give you a one or the other. It's either going to be more potential profit or more bullets to fire for your outright card. So, John, as always, appreciate you joining us here to preview this tournament and the PGA Championship. Again, follow him on Twitter at PGA Tout. You can find his full tournament preview here on thelines.com. Just go to the homepage under the odds tab. You can go to golf, John Hasselbauer, and then PGA Championship preview. It's right there for you. Leave your comments for us. Let us know who you think's going to win this tournament, what your betting card is going to look like. Hit like, hit subscribe. We'll have some more videos for you this week leading up to the PGA Championship and the rest of the majors this season. And last but not least, top right corner of thelines.com. Hit that Discord button. We have a great golf community building there, talking golf, bouncing around ideas for who we like for our outrights. And we're doing that in other sports as well. Our senior writer, Mo Nawar, is talking baseball every single day of the season. We're talking NBA playoffs. And obviously we're big on the NFL and college football once fall rolls around. So, John, thanks for joining us. For John, I'm Steven. We'll talk to you next time. Good luck with your bets for the PGA Championship. And I'm going to go buy a light.